Hey everybody, and welcome to the ExoCast. Today we have some news that U.S. troops that were recently taken out of Germany will now be established in Poland. This is giving clear signals to both countries. For Berlin, this redirection is a textbook exercise in transactional diplomacy and political retaliation. It establishes U.S. hard power presence that is no longer an unconditional guarantee. It is tied directly to rhetorical alignment and defensive spending. Despite Secretary of State Marco Rubio's public statements that the move isn't punitive, the timeline tells us a different story. The Pentagon's push to draw down troops in Germany accelerated immediately after German Chancellor Friedrich Merz publicly criticized Washington's handling of the Iranian conflict, stating that the U.S. was being humiliated by Tehran. The White House paired the troop drawdown announcements with threats of new tariffs on European automobiles, hitting Germany, the contingent's largest auto manufacturer, precisely where it hurts the most. Washington is signaling that Germany cannot openly criticize American strategic choices in secondary theaters like the Middle East, while taking U.S. security guarantees on its own continent for granted. It forces Berlin to reckon with a new harsh reality. If you step out of line, the shield is going to move east. For the nations surrounding Poland, the Baltics, Romania, and the frontline Nordic states, the shift recalibrates the center of gravity within NATO. Countries like Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania have long argued that Western Europe, specifically Germany and France, is too slow, too bureaucratic, and too hesitant to face the direct threat that is posed by Russia. Moving U.S. assets directly into Poland validates the Eastern flank's worldview. President Trump explicitly credited his decision to send the 5,000 troops to his close personal relationship with newly elected Polish President Karol Nawrocki, whom he endorsed. The surrounding nations are learning that bilateral leader-to-leader relationships with Washington yield faster security dividends than relying on the broad, slow-moving consensus machinery of Brussels. By retaining and expanding American boots on the ground, Warsaw cements its status as the undisputed logistical and hard power hub of European deterrence. The message to neighbors is clear. If you want direct American protection, look to Warsaw, not Berlin. While Polish Foreign Minister Radek Sikorski welcomed the news because it preserves American presence at baseline levels, the surrounding nations are also quietly diagnosing the dangerous systemic issue of unpredictability. The fact that the Pentagon was even caught off guard by the sudden reversal on Truth Social reveals deep institutional fragmentation in Washington. For frontline states living next to an active war zone in Ukraine, sudden policy U-turns, even positive ones, create a sense of strategic whiplash. It forces regional planners to worry that a security commitment made on a Thursday could just as easily be unmade by a social media post on a Tuesday. But don't look at this as just 5,000 soldiers shifting coordinates on a map. We have to look at it as a geopolitical message that's sent via military logistics. To Germany, Washington is saying your security guarantees are no longer decoupled from your political loyalty. To Poland and the eastern flank, the message is you are the new frontline vanguard. But to the rest of the world, the real takeaway is that American foreign policy is increasingly driven by transactional bilateralism rather than institutional alliances. Now, this doesn't mean that it won't come without consequences. Russia has seen these measures as a provocation and are now shifting toward more asymmetric vectors. Right as the U.S. troop decision dropped, Russia's UN delegation launched a highly coordinated narrative claiming that Ukraine is planning to launch long-range military drones directly from Baltic territory, specifically Latvia, to bypass Russian air defenses. This is classic Russian gray zone doctrine. Moscow is attempting to manufacture a pretext of Baltic aggression to distract from its own failures in Ukraine and to exploit existing fault lines within NATO regarding their escalation thresholds. The Nordic and Baltic foreign ministers issued an immediate joint statement firmly rejecting what they termed Russia's blatant disinformation campaign. Now, Kaliningrad, which is sandwiched between Poland and Lithuania, is experiencing a structural crisis and is now a vulnerable outpost. Traditionally, NATO planners feared a rapid Russian-Belarusian pincer movement to seize the gap, cutting off the Baltics. Injecting 5,000 troops into the fortress, Poland, alongside Poland's massive 50 billion defense modernization drive, hitting 4.8% of its GDP, massively tips the conventional balance. Any Russian attempt to pursue or pressure the Suwalki gap now hits a highly dense western hard power hub before it can even mobilize. This influx and troop posture act as a massive signal intelligence sponge. U.S. and Polish radar units can now map Kaliningrad's electronic signatures, air defense tracking frequencies, and troop rotations in real time, stripping Moscow's tactical element of surprise. With Sweden and Finland fully integrated into NATO and U.S. troops stacking heavily there in Poland, Kaliningrad's naval and air supply lines are entirely vulnerable. If tension escalates, the enclave is effectively blockaded from day one. This will force Moscow into electronic warfare, which has been bleeding into aviation corridors over the Baltic Sea and northern Poland. It's a cost-effective, deniable way for Moscow to project power, disrupt European civil infrastructure, and signal dissatisfaction without crossing the threshold of kinetic warfare. A buildup of pressure is also being placed on the northern border of Ukraine, with Russia committing a new 100,000 troops to these areas over military and nuclear drills with Belarus. For decades, Kaliningrad was Moscow's geopolitical leverage point, a missile-laden fortress capable of cutting NATO in half. But by dropping 5,000 additional U.S. troops into an aggressively spending Poland, Washington and Warsaw have turned the tables around. Kaliningrad is no longer a launching pad. It is an isolated island surrounded on all sides by a heavily armed alliance. Moscow's furious information campaign against the Baltics and its constant electronic warfare jamming are signs of a deeper tactical realization. In the Baltic theater, Russia is running out of conventional options, and this seems to be the point that Trump is trying to display through this military and diplomatic partnership. I hope y'all have a blessed day. Thanks so much. Like, share, and subscribe, and follow along for more breaking news. Bye for now.